It wasn't the static that drove them mad. It was the voices buried beneath it. A chorus of agony and forgotten truths broadcasting from a place no one could ever find. Deep within the vast, desolate stretches of the Nevada desert, miles from any paved road or flickering light, lies a scar on the earth. This isn't a natural formation. It's a grid of crumbling concrete foundations and twisted rebar, all that remains of Station 73. Built in secret during the height of the Cold War, it was an experimental shortwave radio listening post designed to intercept enemy communications across continents. In the sweltering summer of 1962, Station 73 went dark. All personnel, including its brilliant lead cryptographer Dr. Aris Thorne, vanished without a trace. The official report cited an equipment malfunction and a catastrophic dust storm leading to an immediate permanent closure. But the hushed, terrified accounts from the few remaining military contractors who had worked on the site spoke of a different, more unsettling truth. Not a malfunction, but a profound, unnatural broadcast emanating from the very desert itself. A chaotic symphony of whispers and screams that seemed to pull at the sanity of anyone who listened. Station 73 became a desolate monument to a failed experiment, its existence eventually fading into obscure government archives and chilling unspoken military legends. This story begins with Dr. Lena Petrova, a 39-year-old independent audio archaeologist and frequency theorist, a woman who chased lost signals. Lena wasn't interested in traditional ghost hunts. She sought the imprint of electromagnetic energy, the residual waveforms of historical events, believing that extreme energetic resonance could leave a quantifiable, recoverable sonic footprint. Station 73, with its legendary, mind-bending broadcasts and the inexplicable vanishing of its entire crew, was her ultimate horrifying case study. She'd pored over fragmented, heavily declassified documents from the 1960s, hinting at bizarre localized energy spikes and peculiar psychic phenomena detected by early crude psychotronic equipment, and unverified anecdotes from terrified military personnel who claimed that on certain nights their radios would pick up static that pulsed with an intelligence, speaking directly into their minds. Lena believed Station 73's true horror lay not in what it transmitted, but in what it received, and what it truly wasn't. She never intended for her research to silence her. She certainly never intended for the desert itself to broadcast her demise, but fragments of her journey. Her terrifying descent into the corrupted airwaves survived, captured on her specialized high-frequency spectral analysis drones, meticulously transcribed from her biofeedback helmet's internal audio logs, and ultimately retrieved from a meticulously encrypted, partially melted data core, surgically implanted within her abandoned research vehicle, found weeks later miles from the station's desolate perimeter. The first definitive sign that something was irrevocably wrong didn't come from a spectral presence or a sudden chill in the hot, stagnant desert air. It came from the airwaves themselves, or rather their utter defiance of conventional radio science. Lena had navigated the treacherous, unmarked desert trails and the endless silent expanse for hours, guided by her advanced GPS mapping and the increasingly erratic readings from her long-range radio frequency detectors. She finally located the perimeter of Station 73, a sprawling, dilapidated complex of crumbling concrete foundations and rusted antenna arrays, its skeletal structures like grim sentinels against the vast empty sky. The air hung thick, hot, and strangely devoid of the usual sounds of a healthy desert environment. No buzzing insects, no distant animal calls, no rustling brush. Just a profound, suffocating stillness. She spoke into her field recorder, her voice low, professionally detached though. A subtle undertone of profound curiosity, tinged with nascent unease, was already present. August 20th, 11:45 a.m. Location Station 73, Nevada Desert. Ambient radio frequencies dropping precipitously within 50 meters of the main complex. Registers below typical environmental background. Approaches absolute radio silence. This is anomalous. Extreme signal absorption, consistent with folklore. It's like walking into an EM vacuum. She paused, listening intently to the unsettling quiet that pressed in on her eardrums. It wasn't just quiet. It was an emptiness of electromagnetic chatter, an unnerving void that seemed to actively consume all radio waves, all broadcasts. She moved deeper into the complex, her reinforced boots crunching unnaturally loud on the scattered concrete debris, the sound immediately swallowed by the oppressive silence. She found the main entrance to the underground bunker, a massive rusted steel hatch seemingly fused shut by time and corrosion. But then a faint rhythmic thump, thump, thump resonated from deep beneath the ground, a colossal slow beat, like a monstrous muffled signal. It wasn't the sound of settling ruins or distant machinery. It was too regular, too powerful, too impossibly alive and contained. It seemed to defy the very radio silence it was shrouded in. Hours passed under the oppressive, unblinking sky, a vast, pale dome stretching to the horizon. The silence grew heavier, more pervasive, now accompanied by a subtle, almost inaudible pressure building behind her eardrums. She tried to dismiss it as a psychological effect of extreme sensory deprivation and prolonged acoustic paradox. But the sensation persisted, a dull ache that resonated deep within her skull, mirroring the rhythmic thump. Her biometric suit registered erratic neural activity, localized spikes in her auditory cortex, often associated with processing sound, even though there was no external sound to process. Her portable spectral analysis drones, after hours of sweeping the vast, silent ruins, finally locked onto a major, undeniable anomaly. Not just zero ambient noise, but a consistent rhythmic subetheric frequency emanating from deep beneath the bunker's foundation. This frequency was not astrophysical. It was fluid organic, like a vast pulsating signal. And from its very core, the thump intensified to a palpable throb, along with a faint, luminous pulse captured by the drone's exotic energy imaging. Not heat, but pure contained information. A deep, impossible static gray, like television snow in a void, but somehow terrifyingly intrinsically sentient. She whispered into her recorder again, her academic detachment fractured by awe and profound dread. The source, it's deep, beneath the main antenna array's core, emitting a non-thermal luminous pulse. A deep organic static gray. The rhythmic beat, it's emanating directly from its core. The pressure, I feel it clearer now. It's like the desert is listening. The folklore mentioned a broadcast that ate sanity. This is it. This is the source. This is what truly drives Station 73. A cold metallic taste filled her mouth, a taste of burgeoning existential dread. Driven by a dangerous, irresistible combination of scientific imperative, fueled by the sheer impossibility of her discovery, and a burgeoning icy fear that chilled her. To the core, Lena located the precise epicenter of the pulsing static gray anomaly. It was a section of the bunker's deepest sublevels, were massive concrete sections and rusted. Electrical conduits lay half buried in the damp earth. The air here was utterly still heavy, with a profound earthy scent now tinged with a faint, cloying sweetness like ozone, mixed with something vaguely electrical like burnt wiring. The static gray light pulsed from within the very ground, a vast, subterranean core, its rhythm a slow, deliberate beat that seemed to synchronize with her own. She noticed peculiar, intricate patterns within the exposed bedrock itself, not just natural striations, but swirling inclusions that resembled corrupted data streams or perhaps trapped fragments of consciousness. She moved cautiously towards the source, her suit's lights cutting solitary beams through the oppressive gloom. The ground beneath her felt unnervingly soft, despite its solid appearance, almost like walking on vast taut membranes. She could hear her own heartbeat, unnaturally loud, echoing only within her own skull. But then other sensations began to intrude, not from outside, but from within her own mind. Faint, fragmented memories, half-formed thoughts, almost whispers of impossible frequencies, rising and falling with the static gray pulse. It was profoundly disconcerting, like her own cognitive processes were being played back to her, distorted and amplified, woven with other alien impressions. She reached the center of the anomaly, where the static gray glow was brightest. Here, amidst the wreckage of the sublevels, something impossible was located. It wasn't just rock. It was a vast organic mass pulsating softly, half-buried beneath. The ground, its surface slick and vaguely membranous, radiating the static gray light. It was massive, stretching out of sight into the unseen depths. It had the distinct rhythm of the thump, thump, thump she'd felt. This was the source of the station's endless pulse, a colossal organic receiver. And then just beside the pulsating mass, something horrifying came into focus. Not machinery, but a humanoid figure partially submerged within the glowing, shifting organic mass, as if caught mid-absorption. Its face, agonizingly clear, despite the faint static gray glow, was contorted in a silent scream, its hands, outstretched fingers splayed. It was a man, likely Dr. Aries Thorne, himself the lead cryptographer from 1962. His features were distinct, his expression raw terror. He was not merely a corpse. He was perfectly, horrifyingly preserved, his essence suspended within the living tissue. A testament to an unspeakable fate. Lena stared horrified. This was beyond anything she had conceived. Not geological, not even acoustical, biological. She activated her bioscanner, pointing it at the organic mass of flesh. The readings were impossible, not inert, not dead. There was persistent bioelectrical activity, faint, erratic, but undeniably present. The mass wasn't just preserving, it was sustaining. Against all logical judgment, compelled by a desperate need to understand, Lena reached out a gloved hand and gently placed it on the surprisingly warm, yielding surface of the organic mass encasing the man's arm. The moment her glove made contact, a searing jolt, not physical, but purely mental, shot through her. Her vision blurred, filled with a blinding flash of static gray light. And then she was plunged into a torrent of raw, unfiltered sensation. Not words, but a rapid-fire sequence of images and emotions. The sudden crushing cacophony of whispers, the agonizing sensation of impossible truths filling her mind, the horrifying realization that her very essence, her ability to reason, was being consumed, absorbed by the entity around her. And then a single, agonizing, voiceless scream, echoing in an absolute, suffocating void of fractured logic. The vision lasted only a fraction of a second, but it felt like an eternity. Lena recoiled, tearing her hand away from the living mass, gasping for breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. The internal thump, thump, thump in her head intensified, now accompanied by fainter, more ethereal gibberish from within her own mind, like broken code. This was not a passive entity. This was a living broadcast, and it held conscious agony. The mental jolt from touching the organic mass reverberated through Lena, leaving her gasping, disoriented, her mind reeling from the torrent of borrowed terror. She stumbled backward, her suit's internal systems screaming warnings about neurological overload. The chilling images of the man's final moments, the crushing mental invasion, the horror of cognitive collapse, the voiceless scream, were burned into her retinas, echoing in her thoughts. The profound radio silence of Station 73 seemed to press in harder, now no longer just an absence of signal, but a conscious, palpable presence. The subtle thump, thump, thump from the ground intensified, transforming into a deep, resonant bass note that vibrated through the very ground beneath her feet, through the soles of her boots, up into her bones. It felt like a colossal living transmitter, broadcasting a vast, patient, predatory rhythm of sanity's undoing. She spoke into her recorder, her voice hoarse, strained. August 20th, 2:30 p.m. Direct contact made with organic anomaly. Experienced immediate, intense psychological feedback. Shared subjective experience of cognitive breakdown. The entity. It captures consciousness. It preserves the chaos. The mass is not inert. It's a living processor absorbing all reason. My brainwave patterns are erratic. My mind, it feels stretched, fragmented, nonsensical. She paused, listening to the new, deeper bass note. The gibberish. It's still there. Faint, rhythmic, from within. She forced herself to calm, to analyze. The data streaming from her bioscanner pointed at the living mass was impossible. High concentrations of complex biological polymers interwoven with unknown fluid structures, and persistent high-level bioelectrical signatures far beyond typical cellular decay rates. These were not dead organisms. They were suspended alive, in some terrifying, agonizing state of perpetual mental fragmentation. The entity was a living, sentient biological machine, capable of absorbing and retaining the essence of life in its final panicked moments of utter madness. As she moved carefully through the derelict bunker, avoiding direct contact with the most intensely pulsating patches of the organic mass, the bass note deepened, becoming a vast resonant symphony that seemed to emanate from every surface. The air itself began to shimmer, subtly distorting her vision. She started seeing fleeting ethereal images projected directly into her mind's eye, not memories of the man she touched, but other fragmented identities and perceptions. A blurred figure briefly appearing in her peripheral vision, speaking in a strange, indecipherable tone, then instantly vanishing, only to reappear a moment later, a few feet to her right, as if reality itself was stuttering. A disembodied hand, her own, briefly superimposed over another's, covered in strange glowing glyphs. The terrifying realization that the station wasn't just experiencing glitches. It was generating them or focusing an external force that did. She glimpsed fragmented faces of other scientists' old military uniforms, superimposed over the decaying concrete, their features distorted, shifting, their eyes wide with incomprehension, their mouths moving in silent, desperate pleas. They were echoes of other selves, of vanished observers eternally trapped in the station's warped broadcast. The living mass itself seemed to actively draw her in a seductive, irresistible pull, emanating from its slick surface. It wasn't a physical suction, but a deep subconscious urge to step into its perfect stillness, to merge to understand the profound emptiness the agonizing piece had offered. Her gaze kept returning to the horrifying beauty of the pulsating mass. Its internal static gray glow promising ultimate truth, eternal tranquility, and cognitive oblivion. She felt a profound sense of weariness, an aching desire to simply lie down on its yielding surface, to let the hum wash over her, to become part of its vast living memory of unraveling minds. Her own will felt strangely weak, the boundaries of herself eroding under the constant mental assault. She activated her specialized frequency modulator, aiming it at the surface of the most vibrant patch of the organic mass. The readings were bizarre. The mass itself was generating a subtle internal reality anomaly, actively bending and absorbing mental processes, creating localized pockets of perceptual instability. This anomaly wasn't a byproduct of physics. It was consistent, regulated, almost like the internal process of a vast biological system. This was a living organism, a colossal predatory entity, slowly consuming the very concept of objective reality. And then she saw it. Streaks of deeper, more vibrant static gray within the mass, forming intricate pulsing patterns that shifted and flowed like vast, unseen neurological pathways. This mass was the entity's body, its flesh, its mind. She realized, with a horrifying clarity, that the legends were wrong. The station wasn't just broken, it was broadcasting, and everything within it. They became more focused, more personal. Whispers not of the victims, but seemingly directed at her. You seek signals. We provide. Be absorbed. Be decoded. The words were formless, yet undeniably present in her thoughts. A seductive, invasive presence. She stumbled forward, driven by a desperate need to find evidence to prove this impossible horror. She saw it then. An active cognitive distortion zone. A section of a concrete wall ahead seemed to ripple, its surface subtly absorbing light, then releasing it, defying visual stability. A rusted console briefly appeared to be on the ceiling, then snapped back into place, its broken lights flickering impossible sequences. Objects like scattered tools or debris would momentarily flicker out of existence, then reappear a foot to the left, as if space itself was stuttering. It was happening, in real time. The process was slow, agonizingly so, but inexorable. Her solid perception of reality slowly warped, becoming part of the living, pulsating organism. Further ahead, closer to the largest section of the organic mass, she saw something even more disturbing. A large wild coyote, its form shimmering, half submerged in the glowing, shifting organic mass. Its powerful hind legs still free, but its front paws, torso, and head already solidified into translucent static gray flesh. Its eyes, wide with unspeakable agony, reflected the terrifying beauty of the mass's glow. The bass note resonated from it, and Lena felt a surge of raw, animalistic terror. A desperate, futile struggle erupting in her mind as she inadvertently brushed her gloved hand against a low-lying section of the living mass. The coyote was not dead. It was trapped alive in its silent flesh tomb, experiencing eternal disorienting agony. It's ongoing, she gasped into her recorder, her voice a raw whisper. The assimilation? It's not a past event. It's happening now. It's absorbing living organisms. And they're aware. They're conscious within the flesh. Their minds are unraveling. She could feel a faint, almost imperceptible cold radiating from the very air around her. A subtle decrease in the ambient temperature that her suit registered, consistent with a vast biological process consuming energy. The sweet cloying scent was stronger, almost suffocating, as she watched the horrifying transformation of the concrete. A fine, almost invisible vapor began to rise from the surface of the living mass, shimmering with faint static gray motes. It was not mist. It was a diffusion of the entity's essence, a fine, almost gaseous form of the living tissue itself. It swirled around her suit, clinging to the visor, making her vision subtly blurry. She felt an unsettling, tingling sensation on her exposed skin, around the cuffs of her gloves, and the unprotected areas of her neck. It was a subtle stickiness, a faint tackiness like dried, invisible residue. She tried to wipe it away, but it seemed to cling stubbornly. Then, from the largest section of the living mass, the ground itself seemed to undulate. A wave rippled outwards from its colossal bulk, not of concrete, but of pulsating static gray flesh, smoothly extending, seeking. And then from the surface of the mass, several translucent, flexible tendrils, gleaming with internal static gray light, slowly emerged. They were too perfectly formed to be natural roots or muscle. They were too purposeful in their movement. They moved slowly, sinuously, like probing fingers, extending towards the flickering objects, towards the absorbing coyote, and terrifyingly, towards her. The entity was not just consuming passively. It was reaching. The mental intrusions intensified, now accompanied by fragmented, distorted voices, not from the air, but from within her mind. Terrified, pleading whispers joining the entity's pervasive bass note. Join the frequency forever. She felt her own legs heavy, her movements sluggish, as if the very essence of the entity was beginning to seep into her joints, slowing her reactions. The terrifying realization solidified. The entity wasn't just physical. It was a vast, conscious broadcast, a trap laid for decades. And she had stumbled into its very core. The translucent static gray tendrils, gleaming with internal light, extended from the vast organic mass, inching across the damp ground towards Lena. Their movement was slow, deliberate, utterly silent, yet filled with an insidious, unyielding purpose. The mental intrusions roared in her mind, a chorus of fragmented pleas, and the entity's vast, unfeeling command: receive, process, be assimilated. She could feel a subtle, unsettling cold radiating from the tendrils, a cold that promised not comfort, but absorption into oblivion. Her own will felt fragile, battered by the constant psychic assault. She stumbled backward, desperately trying to evade the slow, methodical reach of the tendrils. Her suit's internal systems screamed warnings about high-frequency energy absorption. The air around her was now thick with the fine, shimmering, static gray vapor, clinging to her suit, her skin permeating her every breath. A sweet, cloying scent was overwhelming, almost intoxicating. She risked a glance down at her gloved hand. A faint, almost imperceptible blurring of pixels was beginning to form on the surface of her glove. A subtle digital distortion that looked disturbingly similar to the initial stages of reality warping she had observed. She frantically tried to rub it off, but it clung, subtly shifting. It was already spreading. The entity was not just reaching for her. It was actively consuming her, molecule by molecule, her very perception becoming the preliminary layer of its terrible, signal-devouring flesh. "It's on me," she gasped into her recorder, her voice raw with a terror that transcended scientific curiosity. "The static gray vapor, it's infesting. I'm changing." My vision, it's glitching. My thoughts, they feel corrupted. She tried to move her fingers, but they seemed to briefly phase through each other, then snap back into place, leaving her disoriented, her understanding of her own body unraveling. The massive organic mass from which the tendrils emanated began to pulse with a renewed, brighter, static gray light. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump intensified, rising in pitch, becoming a low echoing hum, like a vast malfunctioning receiver filling her head. The mental intrusions were no longer whispers, but loud, horrifying echoes of agonizing screams. Thousands of trapped minds crying out in an unspeakable chorus of terror and eternal consciousness. This was the raw, unfiltered song of Station 73, composed of the final moments of all it had consumed, eternally cycling in a loop of fractured signals. Lena knew she couldn't fight it physically. The tendrils were slowly but surely gaining on her, their fleshy tips almost touching her boots. The realization that she was facing a vast, sentient, predatory consciousness, one that consumed life and processed perception, hammered into her mind with brutal clarity. She was just another frequency for its endless broadcast, another channel consumed by its terrifying living static. Her eyes darted around the crumbling bunker desperate. Her gaze fell upon her autonomous drone, lying discarded, near the edge of the sublevel. Having crashed earlier due to the intense energy interference, its outer shell was already partially coated in the thin static gray vapor, but its internal recording systems designed to be hardened against extreme environments might still be functional if she could reach it. If she could transfer her final horrifying data, her last observations, before she became completely assimilated. It was a desperate, illogical hope. She lunged towards the drone, forcing her stiffening limbs to move. The static gray tendrils, sensing her movement, accelerated, their fleshy tips striking the ground just inches behind her feet. The echoing hum of the station intensified to a piercing whine, causing agonizing pain in her skull. The mental screams of the trapped souls became a deafening chorus, drowning out her own thoughts, pulling her towards the edge of madness. She reached the drone, her stiff fingers fumbling with the data port. The blurring of pixels on her gloved hand was visibly thicker now, her movements becoming slow, deliberate, almost digital glitches. She slammed her suit's data cable into the drone's port, initiating an emergency upload. The drone's small indicator light flickered green then blue, and with a final desperate surge, glowing a steady static gray, mirroring the light that consumed the station. Data was transferring, her knowledge, her warnings, but the tendrils were upon her. They wrapped around her legs, her arms, subtle at first, then firm, pulling her gently, inexorably, towards the vast organic mass of the signal-devouring Station 73. She could feel the static gray film spreading rapidly across her entire suit over her faceplate, slowly obscuring her vision, turning the world into a single blinding shifting haze of impossible frequencies. The pervasive echoing hum became a part of her, vibrating through every cell. The mental screams of the trapped souls were no longer external. They were her screams, merging with the chorus. Her final thought as the static gray flesh fully encased her faceplate, her eyes wide and staring, her body frozen mid-struggle, was not a fear, but a horrifying, agonizing clarity. She was Station 73 now, and she remembered every signal. And she was broadcasting and the silent desert wind carried a new signal that night. A frequency of pure terror, forever transmitted from Station 73.